Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome back to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank everybody so much for joining us again for another episode. And I won't say amazing this time. I think I'm going to make this an unrunning joke because my co-host, Mr. Chris Hanna here, he thinks it's funny that I start the episodes out or talk every segment about how amazing something is or how awesome their show is. And I think he just misses the fact that I'm very excited about doing this. And I was supposed to not swear because we were thinking about taking this segment here that we're going to have in just a few minutes with a wonderful, wonderful woman. And we wanted to have this segment and use it for radio because what has happened is drawn some attention here in the secular community as well as in our local Grand Rapids community. And so before we get into the show and before I introduce my co-host and our first guest for our first segment, I just wanted to tell a little bit of a story as to the reason why our first guest is joining us and why we reached out to her to ask her to be on the show tonight. So my sister, who's a teacher, texted me, I don't know, probably a week and a half ago and said, "Holy do you understand what's going on? Can you read this article and give me your take on it?" And for those of you that have listened to the show before, you know my sister is probably the most liberal sibling in my family. And she's not one of those diehard Christians. She still is a Christian, but she's not a diehard Christian. And she's taken her time and effort, and she's not going and goes out of her way to try and be very conductive. But as a teacher, when she sees stories like these come out, and she understands that, hey, everybody should have a voice, she starts to get a little weirded out by the fact that people are disparaging different types of books. And that bothers her really, really, really aggressively. So I'll link all of the articles in the description, but the big one that came out is the one from MLive, and it's called Children's Book Author Responds to Backlash Over Boy Who Wears a Dress. And so that's kind of a little bit of a clickbait title. I'll admit that it is. Then she sends me and texts me another one from, WTV8. And then she sends me a third one. And so I have all of these articles, and I'm kind of wondering, okay, so what's going on? Why is this causing a stir? Well, there was a gentleman in Forest Hills, Michigan, and there was a teacher who read this episode, or this book, called Morris, Micklewhite, and the Tangerine Dress. And I'm sure I butchered the name, and when we bring the guest on in a few minutes, she'll probably correct me, because I butcher everybody's name. That's just what happens on the show. But what happened was this parent reached out to the school system and complained that his son's teacher was reading this book. And the gentleman's name, I'll leave it redacted. You can go to the website and you can find it if you would like to look up who this individual is. He's a 35-year-old Army veteran, and he was discharged in 2010 after an IED blew up in Afghanistan, forcing him to have dental reconstructive surgery. So he's been through a lot. He serviced our country. I do feel for him. But he came to the school system and said, hey, why are they teaching transgender topics? And my first thought is, why would they not, right? I mean, to me, that just seems almost logical that we should be teaching this. This is becoming more part of our society. This is an accepted, I don't want to call it a lifestyle, because in my opinion, it's not a lifestyle. It's the way they represent themselves and feel. And I don't understand why this big of a deal to push this in there. Now, I guess if you're on the conservative side of things, you may take offense to this. You may think this is against your belief system and that somehow you don't want to get engaged with the facts and how reality works. But you do have to at least accept and open the dialogue for that. And so what happened was he created this big stink and talked to the superintendent, and then he got the News TV with TV8 involved, because this individual's like, well, what the heck? Why are they doing this? And no one's listening to me, so I'm going to create a media stink over a children's book. And so I thought, hey, I'm going to go purchase this book, and I'm going to look into it. My first initial reaction, the first thing I think of is, what the f*** would he be upset he needs to get over himself. At some point, we live in a secular society. Your beliefs need to stay with you, and if it's not harming others, there's no reason to do that. And so then a second article came out, and I don't know if it was the same day or the next day, from MLive, and they basically started to talk about how they reached out to the author, who we're going to bring on in just a minute. And they talked about that the point of the book had nothing to do with transgender issues, that in reality, she was talking about the main focus of this book is being bullied. And it makes sense, because this young man and is wearing an orange dress. And most guys don't wear a dress, but some do. And so, to me, it kind of says, well, this guy almost feels like he's discriminating. So then Hannah and I talked, and we thought, what would be better than to actually have the author of the book come on the show so she can give her full understanding of what the book is. We could talk about her feelings and why this individual was trolling her Facebook. But before we get to her, I got to introduce my co-host, because I have kind of neglected him for the last few minutes, because he was kind of being an audio setup, making fun of me because audio on our side. But welcome to the show, my wonderful co-host, my friend, Mr. Chris Hanna. How was your vacation, sir?
It was pretty good. It's nice to get a little ways away. We didn't go that far. We went to Chicago, but it was still awesome to just get up and not be at work.
Yeah, and it was nice. And so, for those of you who are wondering, what are you talking about? Where did your co-host go? Well, he went last weekend. I did the show by myself, very scarily by myself. I will admit it. and he needed a little bit of vacay to take away his time, to go spend with his wife and his newborn child. So we were very gracious to allow him to do that, and because I have a little bit of time coming off up here too as well, and he'll probably have to run the show all by himself.
That sounds good. I don't usually get to talk that long, because you're like, God, it's my turn to talk. So,
so before we go any farther, let's introduce our wonderful guest to the show. And we want to bring her on, and her name is Christine, and I'm gonna probably butcher her last name, Baldacchino. Welcome to the show, ma'am. How are you tonight?
I'm good. You did it. That was perfect.
Is that exactly how they say it? It's Baldacchino. Oh my god.
Yeah. I always kind of cringe, because I always know that someone is gonna, I hope I get this right, and then it's like totally like, no, Baldacan or like Baldacchio or like.
But you quite phonetic.
It is, but you actually managed. It's actually supposed to be pronounced Baldacchino, but when my parents moved to Canada, my dad was going through customs, and the customs officer pronounced it Baldacchino, and my dad was like, "Oh, I thought that sounded a lot more macho." So now it's Baldacchino, macho Baldacchino. You did it! Way to go!
Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. That'll be the only thing I get right probably for the whole show. But we wanted to have you on because, I'll be honest, I had not heard of your book until this happened. And I'm actually kind of excited, to be perfectly honest with you, because if I had not heard your book or heard this article, I would not have heard about your book. And, so I bought the book, and then that's when I had reached out to you and said, hey, would you come on the show? Because we're a local-based podcast. We're nobody famous, but we do a local show. We like to do a lot of different things here, and we thought this story actually pertains to our neighborhood, so why not reach out to you and get a little bit of information on the book? And so the description, if you go to Amazon, says, Morris is a little boy who loves using his imagination, but most of all, Morris loves wearing the Tangerine Dress and his classroom's dress-up center. And so I'll be honest, my immediate thought, and I'll let you explain in a second, my immediate thought was, does this touch on transgender issues or not? And in your response, you said, no, it doesn't. But I would like you to go into a little bit more detail kind of about what the book means to you and what you're hoping others get out of it.
The sum of the book was I was kind of working. I've been working with children for like a really, really long time. I stopped teaching a couple of years ago, but I'd always run into parents who tried to like get me to steer their kids away from things like, oh, I don't want my boy wearing that dress. I don't want my boy playing with what was it? One was a kitchen set, because God forbid you want your kid to know how to cook. But, I've had, like, fathers saying, oh, well, I don't want him playing with the kitchen set because, it's too feminine. And it's like, all right, fine. Like, I pity whoever your son is going to end up with in the future, or that your son's going to end up somewhere where he can't feed himself and like he's fumbling around with a stove and doesn't know how to turn it on, but whatever. And I guess part of it too was when I was a kid, I was bullied for, obviously, like it's not a big deal right like now, but when I was a kid, I was the only girl in my school with short hair. Which for some reason just totally blew everyone's mind. So it was like I kept getting ostracized. I got ostracized by the girls, and I got ostracized by the boys who thought I was trying to be like one of them. And so that's kind of where Morris Micklewhite came from. I mean, I like that, the thing is, he could be transgendered, he could be gay, he could be straight. I mean, he could be, who knows? Right now he's a boy, like he's a little kid, and he's just, the main point of the book is that he has the leeway to sort of be able to figure out who he is, and, not to have that stifled by, or discouraged by, people around him. So.
And that sounds great. I mean, just to have the freedom. Okay, well, this is something that's fun. This is whatever. You're a young kid. You like wearing that? Cool, great. Why are we going to make this big deal about something that just, it's just creativity, free-flowing ideas, thoughts, being yourself, finding who you are. That's something that I don't see as a problem in raising a child, especially in a school.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's why this was kind of, I had heard sort of things here and there where, a librarian will say to me, oh, well, this kid's mother made him bring the book back after he took it out from the library. But like, this is the first time someone's gone to the news. Like, I wasn't expecting, no. This is the first time anything like this has happened. And like we were talking about earlier, like I'm in Toronto, and this is in Michigan, and this is like.
Well, we kind of connected, right? We're kind of connected.
At the hip.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Not as much as maybe others think we should be, but.
We have a couple contacts, one in British Columbia that we talk to all the time, Keith, so we'll have to tag him in this because we found another Canadian.
So in your book, you have, basically the first page that kind of takes hold of where the story goes. It says, most of all, Morris likes the dress-up center and the Tangerine Dress. Morris likes the color of the dress. It reminds him of tigers, the suns, and his mother's hair. He likes the noises the dress makes, the swish, swish, swish when he walks, the crinkle, crinkle, crinkle when he sits down, and he takes turns wearing all the different shoes. But his most favorite ones go click, click, click across the floor. Now, I'll be honest. I will be honest. If you come from my viewpoint, how I grew up, men didn't wear dresses. Just, I grew up an ultra-conservative. I was a conservative Baptist in my upbringing. And so I can see how people may take this as pushing an agenda. Did you have any sort of an agenda that you wanted out of having him wear a dress, or was that just kind of a concept that developed to help move forward your ultimate anti-bullying point?
Well, part of the thing that was important to me was, gender norms and gender identity. And yeah, it's a boy and he's wearing a dress. And for me, that was sort of like, the story was actually inspired by a boy who had been wearing a dress in my class, and his mother came to pick him up and demanded that the dress be taken away from him. So that was a huge part of it. I think that the other part of it was just, kids at that age, they're very interested in sort of sensory exploration and, sound and color and, a crinkly, swishy, brightly colored dress and like shoes that make noise when you walk. It's all sensory, and I find it odd that there are so many people out there who are like, well, I don't see why something's wrong with him. He has an interest in this dress. But it's like, it's a piece of fabric. It's a swishy, noisy, brightly colored piece of fabric that he finds himself enamored with. And yeah, the other kids sort of don't get that, and by the end of the story he learns that it doesn't matter if they don't get it. They don't have to get it. He can just keep doing what he's doing, and if they want to take time to figure it out, they can take time to figure it out. But yeah, I'm very sort of laissez-faire about the whole, if they don't like the way he dresses, then they can bite me. But
as you said, that's the best way to go for it, really. That's what it ended up being when I was growing up as a somewhat misfit, trying to find my own. We had a couple of friends, one of them who passed away in high school, but he had worn a dress a few times in school. You just wear blue jeans and a sundress over it, just 'cause why not? I mean, that wasn't a crazy thing. It was just like, that's just that kid, that metalhead goth kid, whatever. They gave him names, but it wasn't this like huge thing. Like nowadays, that would be on the news. People would freak out about that. So it seems like it's gotten a little bit worse, or a little bit more concentrated on like that gender stuff, as before it was just misfit stuff. But like just letting kids find out who they are. I mean, that's the whole thing. I love the idea of the book, and I love the imagery and stuff. My only question for the book was, who did your artwork? Did you do that, or did you hire someone in for that? Because it's gorgeous.
No, it's her name is Isabelle Malenfant. She's from Montreal, and we've never actually met in person. We've never like spoken to each other. We just like exchanged like sort of a couple of emails after everything was done, which was kind of it's weird because obviously that's not something that would have happened even just a few years ago. But I didn't have any input. Like I didn't get to choose the illustrator. The publisher did all of that, and they just happened to pick an incredible illustrator. She didn't have any input from me. When I saw Morris for the first time, a sketch of him, I just knew that was him, and like that was sort of our immediate connection, was that we both had the same boy in our head, and that was just kind of an amazing thing. She did a fantastic job. That book wouldn't be what it is without her.
And I think that's a good point. You connected with somebody, you didn't have somebody lined up. You found somebody that you wanted to help illustrate the book. And it's kind of nice, and maybe it's a Canadian thing. I don't know if your illustrator was a Canadian as well. Maybe it's a Canadian thing, whereas Americans are bitching about it. You got a Canadians on the other side going, what's the problem? Come on, guys, for f***'s sake. Why are you worried about a guy wearing a dress? Your economy's plummeting. Donald Trump's almost president. At some point, we should be a little bit more worried about that shit.
Well, I mean, that's sort of immediately what came to mind when I heard about this. The reason I saw a review on, like, literally the night before this came out on the news over there. And the review on Amazon was like, I'm gonna, bring up legal action and la 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 la. And I was like, and the person's name was Malibu Fitness. And I was like, okay.
You got rage from a personal trainer?
Yes, Malibu Fitness was really upset about my book. But I kind of laughed it off. And then the next day I find out this guy has like gone to the news with this story about, me covering up the, gay agenda, my evil gay agenda with an anti-bullying message. And I was like, oh my God, this is Malibu Fitness.
That's that guy's name? That's what this good Amazon. Oh man, that's perfect.
Yeah, his name on Amazon is Malibu Fitness. He's not in Malibu, and yeah, I was just totally. Everyone was like, maybe it's not the same guy, and I'm like, no, it's the same guy. How can it not be? Legal action, evil gay agenda, and I don't know.
And I think, and this is one of the points I see, right? One of the positive things I see. You have a book that is, you want to break gender stereotypes. Great, love that, personally. But your main theme is an anti-bullying book. And when you look at that, what is that guy doing? He's bullying you to a point. I'm threatening legal action because you're gay. You, dude. I'm sorry, but you're gay. The gay agenda is now infringing on your right to teach your daughter to be a hateful bigot. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that people are trying to teach you to be a more tolerant person. But what's the underlying theme of your book? Anti-bullying, right? And what is he doing? The exact opposite. He obviously didn't read the book. He obviously didn't get the message. All he sees is a boy in an orange dress, and he just goes nuts. And you just want to stop them and be like, look, whether it has a transgender or a gay or a straight or a bisexual or a non-binary avenue that it's going down, the whole point is to not bully, right? And if we're not bullying, if those people are the most bullied sect in our society, maybe we should stop and think about that. There you go. Hello. You could claim what you want, but it's only a secondary factor that you happen to write a book that speaks to that gender non-binary side. That's a secondary characteristic because they are a marginalized fraction inside of society.
Yes, exactly. He kept throwing out the words First Amendment this and First Amendment that, and I was like, you're trying to get this book banned so that other kids can't benefit from. I mean, I know he doesn't think that kids are benefit from it. But he's not giving any other parents or any other kids any choice. He wants his book out of there, and it's like, just, I don't know, homeschool your kid if you're like, it's not. It sounds terrible, but it's like, it really sounds like he's trying to, like, I think at one point, and I don't know if you had seen, because I put it on my Twitter, the letter that he actually sent to the television station, where he says, well, and then my son told me that the reason that they read the book is because there's a boy who, in his class, who actually wears a skirt and he wears tights. And the boy said to my son, well, you're not allowed to make fun of me because of the way I dress. And I was like, yeah. Exactly. But he was like, yeah, he was like, I can't believe my First Amendment rights are being infringed upon. My son can't even make fun of this kid who's wearing this skirt and tights. I was like, nothing about it made any sense. And I feel bad because it's like, this one kid who wears this skirt and these tights, he's kind of gotten lost in this shuffle where it's like everyone's trying to protect this guy and his son, and in the meantime, nobody cares that the reason they read the book in the first place is because there's this poor kid who's wearing a skirt and tights and, trying to sort of learn how to maneuver life, doing the things that he loves. And it just, the whole thing really kind of, it blows my mind.
You have no words sometimes for people. So let's move off the guy a little bit. And I know we honestly had you on here to talk about him a little bit, but at some point, to be perfectly honest with you, I think we all agree he's a not very nice individual.
Now you're gonna censor it. Now you're gonna be like, oh,
just a little bit. And it's not that I'm censoring myself. I am a little bit, but I don't want it to be unfair because I do know I can at least appreciate why he cares about it in the aspect that I was in that place, but that was when I was 15. I'm 33 now, so at some point you do have to kind of move with the times, but I can understand why his maybe it's his religion that prevents him from being able to have that conversation, and that's fine. I don't agree with it. I don't condone it, but I can at least respect the fact that, there's some point he will have to change, but right now we get to make fun of him a little bit, and he's a great sounding board for a segment.
Well, as per his argument, his First Amendment rights are being infringed because he can't properly bully or make fun of someone. So, hey, guess what? If it works for you, then it works for us as well.
So, I did have some questions my sister asked me to ask you. She apologizes she can't be on. She is a little shy. She's not. This would be something new for her, and I don't want to drag her into the secular world as much. I try and protect my family life a little bit, but and I love my sister to death. She's a favorite human being of mine. But she had some questions for you, and she, when I told her I was interviewing you, she got all excited, and she's like, okay, this is awesome. And so the first question that she had is will there be another book, A? And B, have you ever thought about writing a book from maybe a teenage point of view or maybe a early middle schooler point of view?
When I was thinking about becoming a writer, I actually wanted to write like YA novels, like young adult novels. The children's book thing kind of just sort of like, I kind of stumbled ass backwards into it. Like I had written this one story and I wasn't going to do anything with it. I was just going to read it to the class I was teaching at the time. And another author friend of mine is the one that convinced me to try to get it published. So I'm kind of at a place now where I guess I could go sort of in any direction, but people seem to be expecting that I'll be sticking with children's books, which I kind of want to do for a while because I want to make sure this wasn't a fluke. So the next book I'm working on is about a girl named Violet Shrink, and she's an introvert, but I wanted to do a book. It was important to me to do a book about introverts where the child doesn't sort of come out of their shell at the end. Because, I mean, realistically, most introverts stay introverts. I'm talking everyone's head off right now, but I'm doing it in my room.
It's fine.
I'm doing it in the privacy of my room, like, you know, with surrounded by my books and my cats. And so, yeah, I am an introvert. There was never a moment where I kind of like, I came out of my shell. And I don't think there are a lot of introverts that doesn't happen. So I didn't want to have a story where at the end she kind of, you know, she comes out of her cocoon and now she's a butterfly. I wanted it to be sort of like a celebration of introverts.
Well, you can still be a butterfly and be introverted. That's one of the things that I would assume that most people would be able to understand. Is like you can be awesome and still have the personality quirks that make you interesting. I love the idea that people aren't the same. I would think a monotone, uniform world, or at least United States, would be the most boring place ever.
Well, exactly. And in the story, she you know, her father sort of tricks her into going to these family functions by, you know, calling them different things. Oh, we're going to a shindig. Oh, we're going to a reception. Oh, it's a potluck. And she ends up hiding behind like drapes or like a giant vase or like under a table. And while she's there, she's sort of coping with what's happening around her by creating sort of this fantasy world around her where she's hiding under a table, but she's actually underwater, and she's a shark, and she's looking for sandwiches, and, you know, she's hiding behind curtains, but she's actually in the jungle, and she's a lion, and she's, you know.
I really like this idea already. This is awesome. Is this like the first time you're breaking this news that you've got this next thing going here? We got an exclusive, because I'm feeling a lot of Calvin and Hobbes and maybe some Pan's Labyrinth happening here. This is awesome.
Exactly. Thank you. No, this is the first time I'm going into such sort of detail about it. Usually people will say, well, what are you working on? And then like the news will show me saying, oh, it's a book about a girl. And then they go to commercial and it's like, oh,
that's all we need.
Yeah, we won't go to commercial. Beep. All right, we won't go to commercial. Promise. Sorry. All right, so another question that, you know, we had for you, another thing that we kind of were wondering is, have you ever taken this book and presented it? I know you said you're an introvert, so I'm going to probably say no, but have you ever thought about taking this book and using it as a platform to have a conversation at school systems? So, for instance, in America, they like to bring guest speakers in, and in conservative areas, they like to bring Christian ones in, even though they're not supposed to teach abstinence only and stuff like that. But have you ever thought about taking your book and using it as assembly material? And if not, have you ever thought about writing questions that you could send along with the book? So if a teacher did want to teach it in class like that happened here, you'd be able to say, okay, if these questions come up, here's how you answer, or here's where you could get more information.
The book was lucky enough to be nominated for, it was called, it's going to sound so super Canadian. It was the Blue Spruce Award. And what happens is it's voted on by children. So teachers, school administrators, they have nothing to do with it. It's just kids reading these books. And so that got me sort of a lot of gigs where I'd be going and speaking directly to classes. And I was invited to speak to a couple of Catholic schools. I was raised Roman Catholic, and it's weird because some of them are sort of totally open to, you know, to talking about every aspect of the book, which includes sort of the gender issues. And then some of them, when I'm talking to their classes and I'm inching towards it, I can sort of see their faces changing. Like the teachers are like, ooh. And so I kind of get a feel for what I can talk about and what I can't talk about. Like when I've never sort of forced a subject onto a class that, the school isn't sort of comfortable talking about. But sort of has really kind of come up. I haven't done sort of an event which is just, I'm here and I'm here to talk about bullying, and nothing really like that yet.
We'll announce the Canadian author book tour in Michigan. So that's probably how you should entitle it. But if you ever do anything along those lines, let us know. We could easily try to get it out to anyone we know all over Michigan if you decide to come this way. And we'd love, just to broadcast your thoughts and stuff. This book has been great. We would broadcast this one obviously more, but your new one, the next one, whatever, that would be awesome too.
Yeah. And
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say, you may be able to get booked very easily here in Grand Rapids now that some jackass decided he wanted to, go out of his way and make a big stink about it. So you have some small popularity here in Grand Rapids just because of that.
We'll bring our pitchforks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Malibu Fitness.
Oh, that's a great sound clip right there.
I'm going to wear a t-shirt that says that if you come to Grand Rapids.
Morris goes to Malibu Fitness.
So we don't want to take too much of your time. We know your time is precious, and we thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was very wonderful having the conversation with you. And if you don't mind, I'll actually share your information with a couple other people in the community that do talk about gender rights and trans rights a lot more than we do, and that probably have a better voice to speak for it than we do. We try to be as good of allies as we can be, and your book pertained to Grand Rapids, so it was kind of a no-brainer really to see if you would come on. But if you don't mind, we'd love to share your information with anybody that will listen.
No, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. So as we close real quick, tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter, because I know you're very active on Twitter, and that would probably be the easiest way to get a hold of you, or if you have an email address, and of course we'll post all the links into the description of this episode.
Oh, great. My Twitter is going to be a difficult sort of, it's my first two initials and then my last name, so it's CLBALDACCHINO. That's my clever, easy to remember Twitter handle.
Well, it's better than mine. You know what my Twitter handle is? Christ0583. So, and it's a joke because the first company I ever got hired at that I had to have an email address on, their format was the first name and the first initial of your thing, and the company was they were very Catholic. The owners of the company were, and obviously the IT guy was not, because my email address was Christ at blah blah blah.com, and I got a phone call from my boss being like, "Well, do you fucking think that's funny?" It's like, no, I don't. He asked me for my information. He came up with this, and I wish I could meet that guy to this day just so I could ask him that question, but anyway. As we round the episode, or the segment out, thank you so much for joining us tonight to have this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
So for all of those listening, please make sure you stick around through this really quick commercial break. Go out, buy this awesome, awesome lady's book. Make sure you mention that Cellar Door Skeptics sent you, and let's try and maybe spam this guy just a little bit to kind of give him a little taste of his own medicine. So we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics. Make sure you hang on to your hacks, folks. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're
Promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Like what you're hearing? Check out more Cellar Door Skeptics every week right here on Spreaker and iTunes. Make sure you come back and check out new episodes with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. And always, remember, prepare for the revolution.
What will a child do when there is no way out?
Chris might have told you that his mother's boyfriend was strict, but he wasn't your run-of-the-mill evil stepfather.
Gracious, Chris, what are you doing out so late? A shocking blitzkrieg of murder, conspiracy, and child abuse.
Publishers Weekly.
A grotesquely powerful tale that deserves to be read.
Heresy in the Heartland.
Who is Alan Garfield?
Depending on who you believe, he is either a celebrated Christian minister or the leader of a child abuse cult.
1324 by M. Dolan Hickman. Available on Amazon.com.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much again for sticking around through another segment. On this part of a segment, we thought we'd talk a little bit about stem cell research. And I know maybe that's not really a controversial issue. I mean, it kind of is, but only to, a few select Christians, right? It's not been as big of a controversy as it used to. But what has happened over the last, let's just say, couple of years is it's grown. They're able to now use them for so many other things. Now the question of ethical permission comes into play. And so what happened is a biotech company got granted ethical permission to attempt to use stem cells to reactivate brains of dead people. And I know that probably sounds like an actual episode out of the Twilight Zone, or maybe your favorite horror movie. Maybe Jason came back to life, or Dawn of the Dead came, or some shit like that. But it's not crazy, and we're not that far away from doing some of these different things.
Well, what we've got is they're brain dead patients, though. Like, they're not just like a dead brain hanging out in a vat somewhere, like Cy Ten Bruggencate would love. These are brain dead patients, so these are people that are still alive, but their brains have basically been declared dead. They are simply alive, but there's no actual consciousness or any activity happening.
Yeah, and the name of the company that's requested this was called BioQuark. Quark, I think that's how you say it. Quark. So it's BioQuark. And they went for permission from the Institutional Review Board in the U.S. and in India to use 20 dead patients. So like you said earlier, it's 20 actual dead people. They're not dissecting their brains and putting them in vats or they're not making them crying or anything like that.
Yeah,
they're Ninja Turtles.
It's brain dead people. So let's say you're in a car accident and your head, your body and your brain is hit so hard that you're essentially, there's no way you could ever recover. Your brain is alive, but it's essentially dead. You are a vegetable, the vegetable state that you hear a lot about. This is what we're talking about. These people are alive. They have heartbeats and they're breathing on machines. They're completely kept alive, but they're in a vegetative state. So they're brain dead people that are still alive. And so they're going to do experiments on living humans.
Yep. And the name of the project is called Reanimate, and is called A Second Chance at Life, exploring the potential of cutting-edge biotechnology for human neuro regeneration and neuro reanimation. So there's a lot of different aspects that they are going into, right? They're not just trying to resurrect anybody. No one's trying to bring Hitler back. You don't have to worry about them wanting to do something like that. But the whole point of these projects and what they're trying to get is that if we could study what stem cells can do to regenerate dead brain tissue and stuff like that, what could that do for people in comas? What could that do to people who, are paralyzed, from the neck down? Could we use this to help regenerate spinal tissue? And so the whole point of this is to say, hey, if we can use these stem cells, which I'll be honest, I'm more for using adult stem cells than I am for, using fetus stem cells. But they're using these stem cells to help advance our life. So, let's just say Chris decided he got pissed off at me and he waited outside my house and all of a sudden I'm in my car driving and he T-bones me and throws me into a coma. what they're hoping is that they can use these stem cells to reactivate different chemicals and different things in the brain to help bring people out of comas. And then that way I could come back to life and, go over and shoot Chris in the fucking head, and then they probably couldn't bring him back to the dead if he has a hole in his head, but
Well, we also have just a little bit less of a severe situation. Like, let's say there's someone who might have a hearing impairment, and most of his hearing impairment is assumed to be nerve damage directly connecting his ears to his brain. If they can fix people who are technically brain dead, they've solved the problem of dealing with some kind of therapy for nerves and therapy for brain tissue. And let's say on average, you could possibly get people that could walk again, but you could also get people with vision problems who have the visual nerves and hearing nerves and a variety of other things. So there are a lot of small, simple real world applications for something like this, as well as this extravagant bringing someone back from the brain dead status. So what they're doing is trying to learn things on a living person, on an actual person, but using what they learn to apply that to a lot more of the more acceptable and less controversial things. Like if they could bring people back from a brain dead state, and like we're talking, because it's the neuroscientist situation where they say, well, is your personality directly attributed to your brain or your soul in some religious aspects? Like if your brain's destroyed, if your brain was automatically put back together, would you still be you, or would you simply be reset as a new human, a machine essentially? Well, those are some of the crazier things, but let's just say we figure out stuff about the brain from these tests and from these experiments, then maybe I could hear again. So I love stories like this. I love hearing about this stuff, and I think this is not an unethical situation dealing with people that are brain dead to do basic experimentation, because they're not, like you said, they're not cutting them open and like diving in. It's a combination of therapies on the participants who have been medically certified as brain dead and are kept alive, and they only want to keep them from decomposing on life support machines. So by injecting the brain with stem cells and giving spinal cord infusions or beneficial chemicals and nerve stimulation techniques, which have been shown to bring people out of comas, these things will all be tried out on the brain dead patients. So that's where they're starting, and we'll see what kind of information they get.
Yeah, that way they don't have to, go and operate on live people. Yeah,
well,
they're going to use dead people. That way they don't have to worry about it.
The last
I think
people allowed to do something like that, I think, were the Nazis who tried the actual human experimentation. I think that's maybe some of the weirder countries or something that had really, really despotic regimes did it without us knowing. But the last open cases I know of for human experimentation was probably the Nazis. So,
yeah. And I will admit that there is a little bit of misleading aspects to this title. I mean, they're like we talked about earlier. They're not technically dead; they're just clinically dead. Because if they were technically dead, the Reanimator aspect, and that's a good movie, by the way. We should watch that movie together, Chris. But anyway, the Reanimator aspect to it would not be the same thing. And so what we have to do is we have to look at where do we want to go in the future. And there's a gentleman named Dr. Ira Pastor, who is the CEO of BizQuirk. And he says this. He says, this represents the first trial of its kind and another step towards the eventual reversal of death in our lifetime. We just received approval for the first 20 subjects, and we hope to start recruiting patients immediately from this first site. And they're working closely with hospitals to identify families who are their religious or medical barriers and not asking those individuals, but looking for organ donations, And so what they want is he says this as well, to undertake such a complex initiative. We are combining biological and regenerative medicine tools with our existing medical devices, typically used for stimulating the nervous system. And they claim, and we haven't done this segment on the nervous system, and maybe we should do that, Chris. That would probably be a good segment we have not done yet.
Yeah, we haven't done a legit science segment in a little while. This is as close as we've gotten to it. So, yeah, we'll have to hit that up.
Yeah, and so they talk about, basically the central nervous system being made up of all these chemicals. And so that's what they're hoping is if they use chemicals and brain and stem cells to stimulate that, they'll be able to see a change. And I guess I would ask you, what do you think is the reason behind why they are claiming it's unethical?
Oh, people that hear about this study?
Yes. Yeah, not the doctors. Obviously, that company's not. Because, but they want to make money off it, so they could care less to a point. But the other aspect of they obviously are doing this because they think it'll help. But there's got to be an opposition to this.
I would think so. And my guess would be people who think along the lines of what I said a little while ago is that, like, as long as the person is still heart beating or whatever they believe, that, you know, the personality, the soul, those kinds of things are always there. And so experimentation, they may be in a vegetative state or a brain dead state, but we don't know what's going on in a person's brain at that level. So we don't know if any of this experimentation, needle poking or whatever, if it causes pain. And according to all of our neuroscience, you know, the information, they say that when you're in a vegetative state, you're essentially brain dead. There is no consciousness and there is no thought process. It's essentially a machine keeping itself alive. It's just ons and offs, heartbeat, breathing, sometimes not even breathing. It's the machine that's keeping them alive. But people have a tendency to anthropomorphize even the human body when it's no longer alive to the point where we would call it a human anymore. If it's just simply a beating heart and a brain that is able to keep itself alive in the basic level, is that still a human, or is it just simply a biological machine? Is it something that's just simplified? So like if we talk about animals that are very, very simple, really, really, really simple compared to humans, well, is that life? Is it? Well, yes, barely, but it's no consciousness, so we don't have any problems with the ethical treatments and experimentations. Well, those kinds of things are gray when it comes to a brain dead person. So I can see that being an issue. It's just, it still looks like a human, so it feels weird doing things to it. Maybe. Other than that, I would say there's probably a religious thing, or they just don't like humans being experimenting on any way, trying to supersede, you know, maybe take the hand of God, so to speak. That would really be the area that I would think people that don't like this would be coming from.
Yeah, and the only thing I could think of is that people find it wrong for one of two reasons. One, it would be a religious thing that they don't think we should play God, like you said. And I don't agree with that, but I can at least accept that quandary that they have. And the other reason could be is because if they think it's coming from fetuses and they are against abortion, then I can see that argument. Again, I don't agree with that argument. I think it's weak and bullshit, I guess is the nicest way to say it.
You're talking about embryonic stem cells as opposed to...
Yes.
Okay, yeah. No, the technology they've started to use, I don't know if they're using it in this study particularly. With the new studies, they've been able to revert normal cells back into stem cells. That's a lot of times what most cells start off as, and then they're formed into the particular cell that the body needs or whatever. And so they've been able to regress cells from like skin cells and organ cells back into stem cells. And there's been some controversy on studies on whether it's legit or not, but we've seen an increase in that ability. So that may be what they're using in this case, which would be, you know, getting around that ethical situation of using the fetal embryonic stem cells. I don't know if that's what they're using in this. I didn't see anything in any of the links or sources for that. So if that's the case, then that could be a place too that they could complain.
Yep. And there's a gentleman named Dr. Sergey Palinian, who is the founder and president and CSO of BioCorp. And he says, through our study, we will gain unique insight into the state of the human brain at death, which will have an important connection to future therapeutic development for other severe disorders of consciousness, such as coma and the vegetative state. And so I think, how about this? Maybe there's another issue that they have. Maybe another issue that a lot of people could have with it is that if we're going after, let's say, brains that are dead or almost dead, and we bring them back to life, do we know what that's going to do for the body? People could be against it because maybe that part of it will affect the individual to such an extreme extent that they wouldn't be the same person.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think science shows that, because I don't think that we
have any idea.
and I don't think so either, but there could be that conversation that people want to have. And he says, while there's numerous demonstrations in recent years that the human brain and nervous system cannot be fixed and is irreparable, the idea of the brain at death could be easily reversed seems very far-fetched. But given our current capabilities and understanding of neuroscience, I think at some point it could become a reality. We'll make sure we throw all the links into the description for this, and we encourage you, if anybody has any questions or if they have any information they want to give to us, so they're like, hey, this is my area of expertise, send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com because we would love to hear from you. We'll post these links. I think we posted the link to this article on our Facebook page about a month ago, and we'll repost it again sometime during this week to try and start a conversation because I think this is interesting. You know, Chris, I mean, think about it. If I could live forever or extend my life even 100 years because they're using stem cells to bring your brain back from the dead or from a coma, imagine what they could do to prolong dementia. Imagine what they could do to get rid of that. So even if my body starts to fail, if they could figure that part out, we put transhumanism together with stem cells. I'll be a robot with a human brain. I could live to be 200 years. And I drop tons of cash onto the ability to be able to do that.
Well, there's two different lines in the transhumanism market that this would kind of sort of be touching into. Like there's the transhumanism guys who want to elevate the biological processes of the body, essentially solve all of the problems, fix them, and create like a superior biological machine. And then there's the other guys who want to actually interface machines with the human body as surgical added apparatus. There's a word for it.
Yes, like Deus. There's a video game called Deus Ex. Yes, that's one of my favorite ones. That's how I see the future.
And so that we're not really sure where we're going to go from that. Like if it's going to be the biological aggressive expansion of the human body, or if it's going to be this mind and machine interface. So right now what we're looking at, we're just trying to understand the brain better. And by doing these experiments, like you said, with things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, we're going to see information from results of these studies that could potentially give us an advantage in other areas that we don't know yet. Now, we could take that information and do a couple of different things. Like in the future, it's possible if we can quantify the thought processes, consciousness, and everything like that, we could keep external memories, which would be we might not even be silicon. It would probably be solid state, and who knows, quantum computing, who knows what else in our future, but we could keep our memories and everything safely stored in some kind of an external memory from our brain. So if damage happens to our brain, then we either replace it, renew it, or upload it into a new brain. There's a variety of things that can happen that it's a mix between that biological and that the man-machine interface stuff that's really cool. This is like obviously science fiction now. We're moving into sci-fi, but this study is still kind of in, modern science. This isn't really that crazy. It's basic information, it's biology, it's chemistry, and we're just looking to see what happens. And the ethics of it, now that we're allowed to, like when Obama removed the restrictions that the Bush administration had placed on a lot of stem cell research, the Obama administration kind of opened it up, and we're finally seeing some interesting progress. We may solve some of the riddles of consciousness in the future, and this could be a start. And that's why I'm so excited about it. And then let's say we fix my ears and I'll be able to hear, because as I get older, what I do have is going to wear down. My assumption is when I'm 40, 50 years old, I probably will be completely deaf. And so this is something that I do keep an eye on, because, hey, let's say there's an experimental study when I'm 45 or 50, and it says you want to sign up to be human tested on to see if you can get stem cells in your ears. Yeah, I probably would do it. I mean, depending on how bad the side effects were, but I mean, this would be, I don't need two heads with no ears. I need two working ears.
You need two working ears. Well, hopefully in the future we get that, because you can become an experiment and put our podcast on the map.
Yeah, so I'm going to sacrifice my possible health and well-being, and that'll finally get Cellar Door Skeptics on the podcasting map.
Hey, anything is as ethical as what Trump is. And so as we close the segment out, we're going to be talking about Trump and immigration when we come back from this quick commercial break. Make sure you stick around, because we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
This is Ishmael Brown, the HNIC from the Angry Black Rant podcast, and you're listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much. and prepare for the revolution.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old Atheist Show format? Cellar Door Skeptics podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
This is Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you for sticking around through those amazing last two segments. And yes, I said amazing because it pisses Hannah off every fucking time.
I'm gonna have to get you a tattoo that says amazing.
you could get me a tattoo, but you gotta think it. I was on Atheist Analysis AA. A's just come naturally to me. Just I don't know. But anyway, for our last segment, we wanted to have a conversation about some immigration policies, and I know we've kind of touched on this before a little bit. But Hannah recently had a conversation with a family member, and it kind of sparked an interest in him. And he did a bunch of research and sent me a bunch of links. And so I thought, well, this is a good topic. And, honestly, this actually ironically came up at my work as well. I just didn't give a flying fuck what the other person said because they were a Tea Party conservative, and their theory behind Trump's immigration policies were that, you get all the immigrants out who aren't paying taxes and who are using all the health care and who are eating all our food and basically be giving driver's license, and we get all them out of here, we'll have more jobs for us. But I'll let you start the segment out because you had a conversation with a family member, and I think this is how you describe it to me will play into how we have a conversation about it.
Yeah, it was with my father. My father owns the company that we're partners. Essentially, I'm going to be taking over the company when he's done, and so we always talk about stuff. And I baited him essentially. I've been waiting for someone to say the following words for a while. That Trump, he speaks his mind. He says it like how it is. And I've been waiting for somebody to say this. And he said it a few times, but I never actually got around to, I didn't have a plan yet. And so he said it. He said those words, and I said, really? Well, what does he say that you like so much? Because that's the one thing that I hear that. People say that all the time. He speaks his mind. He says the truth. He says it like how it is. And I ask him, what does he say? And they don't know. They have no idea what they like about him. Or they're too afraid to say that they just don't want Muslims in the United States, or they don't like immigrants and they want them all to get the hell out of this country. And so I said,
does your dad think that? Does your dad want all Muslims out of the country?
No, and
he is Jewish. So.
No, my mom is Jewish. My father's My father's Presbyterian light. He basically is a deist. If you ever really asked him, because I don't think he really gives a rat's ass whether Jewish or whether Jesus or anybody else, so like the Son of God. It's just there's a God of some kind. And so anyways, like what he basically came with is he doesn't like his perspective of immigrants and people of usually minorities that are stealing, that are taken from the government, and his taxes are covering their whole lives, and they're basically living off of him for free. And I wanted him to say that. I wanted him to say that out loud. And I asked him, he's like, well, what do you like about the Trump? What does Trump say that you like so much? And I know my dad doesn't follow politics that hard, and so he didn't have a response specifically to actual things Trump said. It just immediately devolved into the immigration conversation. And the problem that happened is that it came into, immigrants being a drag on the economy, and immigrants, they should be kicked out unless they should go through the actual naturalization process to become citizens, become good tax-paying citizens, and do what they got to do. And I didn't have a good way to get what I felt of, immigration is good. It's good to have people immigrating into this country and becoming naturalized and becoming tax-paying citizens. I didn't have any data. I didn't have any information for where I could go from there. And later reading, I read it from time to time just for the hell of it, because I've read it a couple times, but Christopher Hitchens' Letters to a Young Contrarian. And in it, there's a section in there. This is just a short bit, but this is what threw me for the whole loop. The church and king mobs unleashed by the authorities in Georgian England, where I don't believe I exaggerate, outlets for energy that might otherwise have been directed at church and king. And this is basically, I see the entire conservative end of this argument as a bait and switch, as hiding and twisting and distracting us from the real problem, saying the poor people, the Muslims, the immigrants, those are the ones that are responsible for all your problems, not the economic people who work together for their vesting their own interests and things like that. And so I started doing some research, and that's where this segment came from.
And so basically, he's saying he doesn't have the answer either, right? I mean, your father, and I guess I call him that. I didn't know that we were able to say his name on this show. I didn't know if your father listened to the show.
No, he does. His idea of using the internet is basically that the games on his tablet are connected to it.
So he doesn't have a Facebook, and I know your mom has a Facebook,
yeah.
But anyway, so. In terms of immigration reform is basically to a point what he's talking about and why he feels we should deport immigrants.
Yeah.
And I think the funny thing is that Trump doesn't actually have a plan for deporting them per se or for integrating them. He just wants to build a fucking wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he understands once he builds a damn wall how it's going to be really hard to throw people over that wall unless they get like catapults or something. I mean, yeah, I guess I can see if they build big ass catapults. They're like, hey, all right, come here, dude. Do you have a license? Oh, you're not illegal. Hop in the catapult. We're tossing you over here. We'll give you a couple of whiskeys or something for the road.
That sounds like a Trump. That sounds like a Trump solution. Just shoot him over the wall. Just shoot him.
We build big walls and we shoot people over them.
Yeah.
We don't shoot people. We shoot people over them. But yeah, the logic behind what Trump wants to do is just horrendous. And I think if we actually look at immigration reform, we would be better off. And so you had a couple of articles that you brought in. One called Migration Policy Debates from 2014, and you had another opinion article that you had posted from the Washington Times. And I'll be honest, I'm not a big Washington Times
I'm not usually either.
fan, but this one I did actually enjoy quite a bit. And it says, why immigration is good for U.S. growth. And they say this, they say, if one thing unites almost everyone in America, no matter what political view they are, we need greater investment and growth in jobs and opportunities for as many Americans as possible. And I think that's a good point, because a lot of the people that are immigrants, are illegal immigrants, they're not using our health care very often. And when they do use our health care, there has to be a way the hospitals are writing them off. And I don't think that they come in for the common cold all that often. And a lot of the big thing is the illegal immigrants, their children are able to get Medicaid. And I do know that is a fact, and I do know that a lot of them use it, because we wouldn't want children dying on us, would we? No. It doesn't matter whether they're legal or not. Who gives a fuck? They're humans. They're still people.
They're people, yeah.
They're humans, yeah. And in a world where if we looked at how life is running and how life works, we wouldn't want to just throw children to the wolves. That would be a libertarian idea, I think, if we had to pick on an ideology, but. So I can see that some of their point where they're saying, hey, they're using my Medicaid dollars. They're using Medicaid dollars for that. But at some point, those children are going to pay back into the system. Most of those children don't leave and go back to Mexico. They don't go, oh, thanks for the free health care, everybody, and the education. We're going right back to Mexico. They don't do that. They stay and then they pay their taxes, and they pay taxes for the others because they're allowed to.
Yeah.
And why would we not work towards moving immigrants into our society faster? Why would we not want to do that? Why would we want to have some stupid law that says, oh, we have to export them and get rid of them? And that's the argument I had with the gentleman at work the other day, is he's like, well, Obama's not following the law. He's the worst president because he doesn't follow the law. And it's like, oh, hold on a second. He's not following the law. No other presidents. Nobody's throwing people over walls or kicking all these immigrants out. That's not what's happening. And he's saying is, hey, if we did this, that would be following the law. And I'm saying, well, so all you care about is that he's not following the law? Well, yeah. Okay, well, that seems fucking stupid to me. No offense, but that seems illogical that, oh no, he is not going to follow the law, therefore he's bad. Well, hold on. Maybe he just can't get enough buy-in to fix the law. Maybe he can't get enough reform to actually have it change.
Well, what was he?
And I think,
what was he doing that was against the law? That's my question. Because as far as I know,
illegal immigrants aren't allowed to be here.
Yeah.
And they get driver's licenses, and they're able to drive, and they're not allowed to be here, and so they're using public roadways and all those other stupid things, and that's why that's what he's saying is they're using incorrectly, I guess, if you want to call it that. And the president should stick up for the United States and evict them, is basically what he's saying.
Well, yes. That's one of the fun things about President Obama that I actually disagree with, as far as his campaign is concerned, or his administration is concerned, is he's maintained deportation rates that the Bush administration maintained. He's been deporting immigrants, illegal immigrants, at just the same rates as the last couple of presidents have been. He hasn't turned it down. He proposed immigration reform, but he hasn't made any drastic changes. He's still kicking people out just as fast as anybody else used to. He's just trying to make some kind of reform to get those people into the system. And that's basically where this argument came from for me, is we were talking, my father and I were talking about how do I get people into the system? Because he said that the big thing is like they're using up health and welfare and all these things. Well, they can't. They can't. You cannot get on any kind of SNAP program without a social security number and identification. You can't get on any of these welfare programs. The only thing you can use is emergency cares and hospitals where they can't turn you away. But there's a risk there, like you said, that you don't think they're going in for stomach aches to the hospital. They don't. They go when they're almost dead. Like they go when there's a horrible, horrible thing happening to their body and they can't survive or they can't push it away any longer. So they work under the table for cash under usually bad conditions, and they don't seek health care until they can't refuse it anymore. And then they go in and they use government money, and there's a chance that they'll get deported as soon as they're healthy enough to leave that hospital. Like, that's the life that they live in. And it's not this, I'm going to sneak up and steal your steaks from my SNAP coupons or whatever, that a lot of people think that it's just like, oh, it's welfare, they're stick. And so my first thought was, well, what is the legitimate case? What's really happening with that? Because I want to get more people. Obviously, I want those people who are coming into the country, I want them to get into the system and paying taxes. And the only way I could think of to start it was to increase work visas. Because the way it used to work back in the day in the United States is you came into the United States, and if you were here for 5 years, then you could apply for citizenship. But as soon as you arrived here, you had to announce that you were no longer affiliated or associated with any other country, that the U.S. was your home and place of life and living. And then after a certain period of time of being here, and I don't know how they taxed, but they had some kind of taxation. Then after a certain period, you could apply for citizenship and you would be either approved or not approved. And I don't know what happened if you were not approved. But that was the way
they would evict you. They would get rid of you. They would deport you.
So this was like these were the Europeans, immigrants coming to the United States. They landed in New York, they ended in Boston, they landed in Massachusetts, and they would get here and they would work. They would live and work for a certain period of time. And after that time period, they became citizens. They didn't have to take wild, crazy tests. And let's face it, more than likely, they probably already spoke English because England was taking over the whole planet at that point.
But the difference there, and I will play the contrarian a little bit in this, is the difference there is that's back before we had the technology we do today, before we had the overcrowding that we have today. And that's some of the argument that you hear. And we have to actually admit and look at the other side of it. We have to go, okay, you know what? There is that other argument. There is the understanding that back in the day, there was more ability to absorb them. People are now going to claim that there's not an ability to absorb this, and that's why we have to do things differently. But, you know, in one of the analysis that you posed, they talk about this. They talk about immigration reform and improved economic growth. And they basically said that it will boost 4.8% and productivity 1.1% over 20 years. And reform would also help the U.S. employment and raise wages. And the first thing that stands out to me is what jobs are half these people doing? You know, I lived next door to some illegal immigrants back in the day, and there was 17 of them living in one house,
Damn.
3-bedroom house. And it's because they couldn't afford to do more. The one gentleman worked on cars, right? He got paid $5 an hour to do oil changes at some shop down the road. And I probably should have churned them in, but I was worried that if I churned that shop in, that guy would lose his income. And he was trying to provide for his kids. And it's not fair that he should have to lose out on the opportunity for money, even if it's unfair. And, you know, I tried to have a conversation, and they were just scared about him getting deported because the first thing that they're going to do is deport the males, which kind of sounds like the Bible. You know, I mean, what happened in the Old Testament? Oh, yeah, they killed all the men and all the boys and kept all the women and children. You know, that's almost kind of what happens in immigration policies is they're like, oh, hey, let's get rid of the men. We'll keep the women and the children. It sounds very similar.
Yeah,
but it's sad because I couldn't do anything to a point about it because I didn't want to violate his trust. I didn't want him to get deported, but I didn't know what else to do. He's making $5 an hour. For fuck's sake, that's horrible. That's not even minimum wage.
No.
And so the big question is, who the fuck's going to do some of these jobs? Are we going to see businesses go out of business? Are we going to see produce increases in cost? There's all sorts of things people have to take into consideration by just deporting a bunch of people. Whereas, in my opinion, and maybe this is a socialist in me, that says, hey, if we immigrate them and migrate them into our society, they can pay taxes, which means they can get better jobs and they can actually have a better opportunity to get health care. And we wouldn't have to be back at this bottom line where they're scraping by and we're using their labor on their backs. Let's bring them into society. And to me, that's the biggest fucking argument right there. To me, that's where it shows if you're anti-immigration, I almost feel like you're fucking somewhat racist to a point. You're like, oh, you know what? We got to now raise minimum wage. Oh, now we got to do something about that. And instead, it's just easier to bitch about it. Once we actually want to do something about it, you got to actually separate people and families and send them back in poverty. Send them back to a place they have nothing. Or you have to turn around and you have to raise the wages. You have to create a minimum stance or a minimum lifestyle for these people to live, which is going to cost more money to certain organizations, and it'll put a lot of businesses out of business.
I don't know the particulars for businesses going out of business, but basically the way I picture it is we need money in the government to cover the costs of people that are going to be in low-income people who need assistance, and that they're going to be utilizing the social programs that the United States offer. And so right now, those people are here. And they're coming here at a lower rate than they used to. So illegal immigration has actually been going down because quality of life in the United States has kind of been reducing of late. We've seen a larger inequalities. So the poorer people in the United States are getting poorer. But the people that are here, the ones that are coming over still, like that entire group of people, they're coming here even though it's illegal. Trump can put up his ridiculous little wall and whatever, it's still gonna be, there's still gonna be people coming to the United States, and there's still gonna be people coming here. It's like the bathroom argument that we're hearing is like, oh, there's gonna be people coming in the bathroom. Well, there's no law on the books right now for that situation, and there aren't already people breaking into the bathrooms and raping all the kids. Right now, the laws are on the books saying illegal immigrants can't come to the United States, but they're here. They're already here. They're coming over all willy-nilly, and what we're doing is we're creating this underground network, this underground community, like the people that you live next to. They're under the system. They're not on the grid. They're completely separate from anything. How do we get those people into paying taxes? Because that's the most important thing. If you get those people integrated in the system to where they can pay taxes, then my father's argument that he has to support them and they don't put anything into the system is immediately nullified. So how do we get those people into the system? It's pretty straightforward. That the old style of, you know, if you're here for a certain period of time, you can apply for citizenship and a variety of different work visas. So the H-1B Genius Grant gives you free education in the United States. But what used to happen is they would stay here and they would innovate. They would do all kinds of great things for the country. But now they're leaving because the quality of life, like I said, has been going down and the middle class has been draining. So they go back, want their education, to wherever country they came from, and they actually have a better quality of life there. So we need to increase that quality of life, and by doing that, we essentially would be making immigrants have a better lifestyle, have better quality of life. And the article that you were mentioning that I posted is from the Washington Times, which I also don't always agree with, but Governor John Engler is the guy who wrote that. He used to be the governor of Michigan, and so I immediately took a little bit of consideration there, because the guy wasn't a terrible governor, but he was kind of in between. He's very centrist, but like you said, he said that all the benefits that society, that immigration reform could improve economic growth and all that, but it also has a powerful effect on increasing fiscal challenges. So like there's more federal deficits, and they said that the deficits would actually decrease by 1.2 trillion over 20 years, because immigration reform is a strong antidote to deficits that for vital activities, so like infrastructure investment and worker training programs that are really hard to fund today. If we start taking these people in, start taking their taxes and get them into the working force, that money can be used, as opposed to essentially them working by cash and working for cash all the time. That's what I'm trying to get into. It's like the economic benefits of not making them criminals, but utilizing their workforce, utilizing what they have to offer, and making go from it. The second article that I linked in our outline, it specifically talks about the benefits and obviously the difficulties of having immigrants and stuff. And it really is. It's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's OECD, and it's a PDF, and we'll share it in the links, because this thing is rich with data. It's got a couple things that don't say that there's really no pro or con, but there's a lot of great stuff in there that talks about the contributions.
Well, they talk about one study, they say they do say that their big thing, their second point that they talk about is that there isn't a lot of empirical studies that have tried to solve this problem, but there has been a few, right? And so one of the studies looks at the impact of migration on economic growth over 22 countries between 86 and 2006 to demonstrate a positive but fairly small impact to human capital. And the contribution of these immigrants to human capital tends to counteract the dilution effect, which they call the impact of population increase on capital per worker. A lot of big fucking words, it seems like. But the net effect is very small. And that's fair, right? The net effect is small, but they say an increase of 50% in the net migration of foreign-born generates less than 1/10 of a percent point variation of productivity growth. But it doesn't show a negative. I think that's the biggest point to be made here is people can claim it's a negative. They should actually read this fucking article and they should be going, hey, you know what, it's because it doesn't produce a positive output for me. That's what they should say, because they're saying it creates a negative outlook. Well, these studies show that it doesn't create a negative. It just isn't as positive as others. But if we take a humanist stance, and you know me, I mean, you know the way I think and the way I work, I'm a humanist at heart, and for me, that's the big thing that drives me, is that. And for me, it would be like, if they're in poverty, this is an easy way for me to help without going to war.
Oh, yeah.
We got to go to war, we got to intervene in these countries. That's horrible. Well, if we take in, a 1 or 2% of individuals, it's not as bad as it would be as if we went and started bombing countries and then saying, oh, hey, by the way, now you got capitalism, and oh, hey, by the way, now you're going to take our government style and use it in a primitive area. We know that didn't work in Iraq, for fuck's sake. I mean, they're still at war. How many fucking years later, after we've already invaded them and instituted, I don't know what the American law, if that's what the hell you want to call it.
Yeah, well, the current immigration crisis, the current refugee crisis, the thing that everybody's all freaked out about is like, how are we going to pay for this? It's a result of basically bombing massive portions of the Middle East. We are seeing right now a refugee influx into places that aren't obviously war zones. It hasn't been seen this big since the end of World War II. This is clear case as a result of warfare, of destruction. People don't want to live in that shit. They want to get the hell out. They just want a normal life. They want a life where they can create a little job, start a little company, and feed their kids or whatever. In the first article that we linked, it says that immigrants are likely, or nearly 50% more likely, to start a business than native-born workers. These businesses create jobs, bring more customers in the supply chain, which in turn generates the revenue, local governments, resources, communities across America. I mean, the list goes on for the benefits of people coming into the country, increasing diversity. We talked about gentrification last week, and 2 weeks ago, the gentrification aspect of this is like adding cultural diversity to an environment, to a neighborhood, to cities, is usually considered a good thing. It makes life vibrant. It makes life interesting. An important note: the immigrants and their children founded more than 40% of U.S. Fortune 500 companies. That's more than a third of U.S. Fortune 500 companies. My favorite example is Elon Musk, SpaceX, Tesla, PayPal. The guy is an absolute genius and entrepreneur. But if the United States had never granted him citizenship, we wouldn't have any of those things. It's a benefit. Bringing these people in, bringing their different thoughts in, bringing their different way of life in, and using it as part of what makes America great, to use Trump's ridiculous slogan that we're not
careful there, buddy. Careful there.
We are a great country, and it's not that we're not great now. That's it. That's what his slogan insinuates, is that it's not great now. We need to make it great again, like it used to be. Well, you know what? It's always been great, and we have a very different way of doing things than a lot of the rest of the world. And we should use those things to our benefit, including taking in these people and using this, like you said, human capital to benefit our society, as it's been shown in a lot of tests and a lot of examples that it's a good thing. It really is a good thing. If you just vacuum people, you're going to have trouble. But they've shown that a lot of people that are coming in as immigrants in countries, in the study that we linked as a PDF, it shows a lot of really great stuff, or status quo maintaining. It isn't this massive detriment to society and the GDP and all kinds of stuff that a lot of people in the conservative market who would benefit from xenophobia and anything along those lines. It's just, the United States has always been an immigrant country. We've always been incredibly diverse, and it's what frustrated a lot of people for a long, long time. I mean, the Irish immigration status problems, when they used to just attack Irish Catholics and stuff like that. We've moved on from that. We went to the African Americans and the civil rights, and now we're attacking Mexicans, and we're attacking gay and lesbian and transgendered people. Like, we've always just isolated different groups of people. And we move on from that, and we find some new group to attack, and we assimilate the rest that we used to attack. It's sad that this is what we're doing, but I really think the immigration crisis is something that we could use to our benefit and finally start progressing, as opposed to regressing like we have been.
And as a last point that I have, for this is, we bring the people in. We talked about this when we talked about the feminist thing. If you beat women down, right, and you hold them down, they have good ideas. The more good ideas you have, the better you are allowing society to stimulate those, and the more we're going to evolve. It's the same way with allowing immigrants in. One of the last points that I wanted to make on that was that by bringing them in and raising the GDP, right, you're going to give them more money to spend. Well, they're spending money in the economy, right, and they're paying the taxes on what they purchase. But we can nail them twice. We can nail them when they
make money,
get their paycheck, and then when they spend it. But what's the big point? What can you not do if you're an illegal immigrant? You can't get a loan unless it's an illegal one from the mafia. You can't get a loan.
Yeah.
And so that's the big thing right there, is that how did capitalism grow so big? Whether we agree with it or not, Chris, and I am very reserved about my capitalist point of view, but whether we want to believe that or not, we have to look at and understand that if you allow them to take loans and have that, you increase your economy and you increase the ability for them to spend money in our society. So without that very fact, we are technically harming capitalism. So, Trump, you're not making America great by building a fucking wall. No. You're technically harming America in the way that you always do.
Oh, the payday loan market, I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. It's the check cashing places or whatever. Most of these immigrants, they can't get bank accounts. They can't get any kind of credit. So they do is if they can get a check, they cash it at these payday loan advances while the check clears. Well, these things have 10, 15, 20% cuts out of the check, so they lose that money. And if they take out short loans, there's a company in Michigan that's called Western Sky Financial, and it's a Native American money lending scheme, but they have such a high interest rate that if you take a $5,000 loan out and make the minimum payments after, I believe it's 5 or 10 years, you'll pay almost $20,000 back in total pay for a $5,000 loan that you can get immediately. But the interest rates are so high, and obviously, like I said, they take to checks for these check cashing places. These are the kinds of things that are just adding that. This is pure capitalism here. This is very unregulated territory. This is one of the areas that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the DNC chair, she's tied up in a lot of support for these check cashing people, and they don't. The rest of us are like, really? This is something that the Democratic Committee, the Democratic National Convention is supporting, but that hopefully she'll be ousted by a new competitor. But like the check cashing communities and all this kind of stuff, these are more things that keep the people at the bottom, they keep them there. And by increasing, regulation on capitalistic endeavors, like what you mentioned, capitalism, but regulated capitalism where we're paying attention to stuff to help elevate and increase class mobility. So you come in as an immigrant, you start a business, you're doing well. You can move up to the middle class, then you can move up to the upper class. Unfortunately, there are class tiers in this country, but those kinds of things would be considered a good thing. But we have to increase that class mobility to strengthen the middle class. And all of this immigration stuff and a lot of the stuff that we do with our taxation and our minimum wage reductions or maintaining the low minimum wage, it keeps the people from being able to move in classes. And I think that if we took in more immigrants legally, like they're already here, if we made them citizens easier, that they could start paying taxes, we would see more class mobility in our economic structure of our country. And I think we would see that strengthening of the middle class that we want, that we need to, the middle class strength is usually considered a good indicator of the economic health of a country, and ours has been getting lower and lower. So our economic health of our country, it seems to be getting lower and lower. I would like to see the immigrants be the people that help that out, and I hope that a lot of the information that we are sharing tonight, like with where the growth in the GDP and maintaining is, it shows through estimates and through a couple of studies that immigrants can be beneficial to this country, and they have been shown to be beneficial to a lot of places in like Europe. And so maybe we can use that information, try to figure out policy to help benefit this country and not leave people just into the dust and push them and throw them back to Mexico or kick them out of the country, because I don't think xenophobia is good for anyone.
No, it definitely is not, Chris. And on that note, we have to wrap up another amazing, awesome show that we had. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around to talk about Trump and his wall and Chris's dad, because they all seem to be one and the same. Though I think with a little education, Hannah, your dad will come around. I do think a little bit of education. Maybe you should have him over to dinner at my house and let him and I get into it, since I'm a little bit more aggressive than you are on some things.
He likes what Bernie has to say about a lot of stuff. He just doesn't think that he could ever make those changes. Like, he's like, yeah, Bernie.
Whether he does it doesn't, to me, that doesn't matter.
I know.
Bernie doesn't get it, which is what it looks like. No one should vote for Trump instead of Hillary. That's like the most illogical fucking thing I can think of. But maybe have your dad over to my house, and now that I got to clean, your dad can come over, and him and I'll have a nice long conversation over a glass of whiskey and maybe even a little green cigarettes, and we'll move from there. So thank you, everybody, for sticking around for another amazing episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Make sure you go over to iTunes, give us a rating, send us a message at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. Tweet at us, subscribe to us on Spreaker, follow us on Facebook, and for fuck's sake, email Hannah and tell him to stop rubbing his nipples. So with that being said, make sure you guys stick around for next week, because we'll be back with more Cellar Door Skeptics. Have a good night, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.